an all crisis called OTEP, all tech. As an influence of good thought is from joint conversations about crisis hotlines that in 2020, New York State legislative bill will be on the floor on a mandatory crisis system designed to have a human responder to all crisis calls or texts. Welcome to the show, Eva Dene.
Good afternoon, how are you?
Great. Okay, first, you feel it's very important to build an awareness of this killer, suicide. I don't know if people usually call it suicide a killer, but obviously it is. And to demystify it so that people aren't afraid to talk about it.
That's correct. It's something that's happening more often, and people only talk about it when it happens, but not helping people to understand how it happened.
Okay. Now why do you feel people are afraid to talk about it? Why would that be?
It's sensitive. If someone self-medicates, self-initiates death, it's hard to explain. So families are in shock. They don't know what they did. Probably a guilt factor, not understanding if they had a part to do with it, which in a lot of cases that's not the case. But it's a hush-hush subject. So people are dying from many things today. And we talk about just about everything else except suicide. And it's not going away. It's actually growing larger.
Now, do you feel that the person who's bent on committing suicide, can they verbalize their fears to anybody else, or are they afraid if they do that it makes them a weaker person? Like talk about police officers who are unfortunately ending their lives and they feel it's not a sign of strength to admit that they have problems.
In some cases, people do not have problems at all. So I like to mention that when I speak about mental health, I say mind/mental because the two words are synonymous. So if you ask someone, hey, what's on your mind? How you doing today? They'll respond. But if you say, how's your mental state? They'll step back and be a little resistant because the word mental comes with certain social stigmas. People aren't always depressed. They're not always going through emotional trials and tribulations. Sometimes it's a side effect of a medication or a street object. You know, you have the street drugs that influence you in different ways. Alcohol, downers, uppers. It all depends on where you are and what's going on in your life. I had an example of a lady who was driving down the street and she heard faster, 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 now crash. And each faster got louder. She pulled over. She questioned what was that. When she went home and checked her new medication as a dialysis patient, one of the side effects was suicidal thoughts. We here can cause suicidal thoughts when they list side effects of medication. Sadness, depression, suicidal thought being the ultimate, but no one ever talks about what that thought would sound like. How many people are listening to this show right now driving down the street? So we need to learn and start communicating and talking about what those thoughts would sound like. You don't have to answer them in the way that they want you to answer them, but you also need to know it's a foreign language, as a matter of fact. So I think this book is actually, I just realized that, to help you learn a foreign language, help you learn how suicide will come to you. I remember back in the 70s, people were sticking their heads in an oven. And when I heard the story of the lady driving down the street, I said to myself, suppose they were just lighting their pilot light. Because back then, if the pilot light went out, you would have to turn the gas on, light the match, stick it in. Suppose. And that little creature came in and said, take a deep breath. All you need is two. I'm not giving anybody instructions. But, you know, in an oven full of gas, 2 deep breaths, and you're no longer in control of yourself. So these people are not always trying to kill themselves. That's not their intention when they wake up in the morning.
Side effects of medication. Now this is very important what you're mentioning. You see medication being advertised on TV constantly, and they talk about, they enumerate all the side effects. But you feel doctors, they say, well, take this medicine 3 times a day for a week, you know, with a lot of water, with food, no food, it'll make you nauseous. You don't have the food alongside the medication. But they ever say, by the way, what are the side effects? You'll be suicidal. Do doctors take that responsibility and tell? They can't anticipate that, but they at least hint to the person, you might go suicidal. If you do, immediately call me up. Don't take a medicine anymore. But are they sufficiently educated the public, their patients rather, about these horrible side effects?
I would say thorough physicians may mention that. It's also listed, and it's our responsibility as consumers to read all the fine print. So it will come with the medication, with the description of the medication, with the possible side effect. But you should also ask your physician. You should look it up. Everyone is walking around with devices and they only use it for fun and play. So if you're having a conversation and you have a question, you get cross-reference. You pull out your device, you Google, oh, they don't pay me. So you pull out your device and you search for whatever it is you're talking about so you can ask the questions with the person who's giving you the direction to do something. But I will say this, healthcare providers, police officers are second to healthcare providers that commit suicide. Second, healthcare providers. So it's really hard to realize why these things are happening, but I don't believe, again, that people wake up in the morning and say, that everyone who's doing it is waking up in the morning or leaving their desk and saying, this is what I'm going to do today. Dentists, very high rate. And I'm wondering if it's, just thinking this the other day, that when you get either gassed up or you're put, you're anesthetized for procedures, well, it's in your body. But now when the dentist is working on you, your mouth is open. So what's in your body is now coming out. I'm wondering if it is the side effect of the medication that they put you under to do the work on you that they're breathing in that's causing that to happen. Just wondering.
So right now, unfortunately, it's across the people who are affected represent a cross section. It could be the police officer, it could be a child who's being bullied, it could be anybody and everybody. Rich, poor, and when you mentioned before the fact that why can a family member recognize suicidal tendencies? Their son or daughter might be manifest depression all the time. I'd be happy one day, oh, my kid's okay, and all of a sudden they're not happy. So it's not a continuous. And that's very interesting. I would imagine if someone's suicidal, would they be depressed and full of anxiety 24/7?
No, not necessarily so. And communication is important. So this book really highlights communication and the different levels of communication that we should keep ourselves up on, seeing things that are different. But it's not always the case. I am also led to believe that, again, as there are medications that they list side effects, there are some medications, including immunization, where they're not listing the side effects. And I looked up one the other day, the meningitis vaccine, and it affects your neurotransmitters. So I learned on February 25th that protein deficiency causes your neurotransmitters to not function properly. Well, that's your brain, that's your mind, that's your mental cavity. We have to be knowledgeable and not be afraid if we don't know. You know.
We have to be knowledgeable. So in other words, we should be knowledgeable consumers.
Yes, we should be.
In other words, don't just feel that your doctor's gone. Go home, do your research, do your homework, do your due diligence, and see if that particular medicine has side effects. And if it has side, well, what if you find out that you might experience suicidal tendency if you take the medication? What do you do then? What would you advise the patient to do? They need the medication for whatever reason. What would you advise them to do?
Definitely call someone. If they feel like, if they get a suicidal thought, they should call someone. And I'll go back to when, back in the 70s, because I've been paying attention a very long time, people were using pills to commit suicide. But most of the time the pills were prescribed to them. They didn't have to go out and borrow them. So that suicide, in the first chapter, I profile suicide as a killer. And it is a killer. And I help people to understand some of the different ways it can come to you. Some of the different avenues that are open even when you're young and not realizing it, that allows it to get into your system and watch you and be familiar with you. Know your character, know your personality. And I say it pops in like a Mexican jumping bean, but you must be young enough to understand what a Mexican jumping bean is.
Okay, what I'd like you to do right now is select a few paragraphs of your book that will tell the reader something about the book and how important it is.
So I'm selecting chapter 6 called Transformation, the Change. It says who, what, where, when, how, and are you sure? Questions always lead to answers. And yes, you can question and answer yourself. If it is okay in spite of what they tell us. Because, you know, they tell us, don't talk to yourself, or you can talk to yourself, but don't answer yourself. Nobody knows better than me. So, feed yourself with the right thoughts of pleasure, with ideas of greatness, read right, listen right, communicate and talk right, keeping yourself in the company of goodness or no company at all. When we are ready to make changes in our lives, not everyone will agree with the change because they aren't ready. Keep in mind, even if you are a twin, you were born by yourself, given the strength and wisdom during that time that is specifically for you. It is self-evaluation time. Who are you? Who have you become? Who did you think you were going to be? How and what do you feel has contributed to you being the way you are, seeing things the way you do? Did the music of your childhood affect who you are? The shows and movies you watched? The people who taught you? Can you remember the adults from your past? Were they kind and patient, or angry and mean? Do you feel that any of these answers have affected your life and the way it is today? How do you see yourself as you self-evaluate? Now use others and ask them the questions above. Ask them more questions. See who really knows you the way that you know you. The process will also allow you to see those that aren't necessarily going to be with you in your new life. Like 3 people witnessing an accident and each one having a different story, this is based on how people view things, including how they see themselves. You can be looking at your life, and this killer embedded in you can cause haze to your view. So asking questions and self-evaluating can help clear the view in order to put your life together the way you want it to be.
So basically what we're talking about, we should not be afraid to talk about this.
Communication is the key.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. And how can our listeners, readers, contact you to purchase your book?
I would love for you all to visit networkingforsuccess.info. That is my website. You have several different options. You have an ebook, you have a paperback, and you have a free gift coming to you. The paperback is available online, and it's also available wholesale. It's available on Amazon. It's in some of the other online outlets. Networkingforsuccess.info.
Okay, fantastic. We have been speaking today to Eva Dene Smith, the author of Suicide, a Serious Killer. Let's end it today.
Thank you very much, Marilyn.
Okay, great. Okay, I don't know if that's going to work, but we'll email you, the link. Oh, we need your